I'm John Fensterwald, writer and host of EducatedGuests.org, a blog and forum on California education policy. Join me while I interview important and interesting leaders in education. You'll learn a lot in 10 minutes or less. Today I'm with Chuck Weis, the superintendent of Santa Clara County Public Schools, and important to today, the immediate past president of the Association of California School Administrators. Chuck, thanks for joining us.
John, thanks for having me.
So in mid-May, ACSA, the association, the PTA, state PTA, California School Boards Association, representing 60 individual students and 9 school districts, files a suit in Superior Court challenging the funding of California schools. Mm-hmm. And it's known as Robles-Wong versus State of California, after Maya Robles-Wong, who's a student in Alameda High School. So Chuck, tell us what the suit's about, and let's take for granted now we know that California is behind the nation in its funding of public schools, several $1,000s below average. And we know that California is last in number of counselors, close to last in terms of teachers and librarians relative to a number of students in the nation. So let's take that as a given. Mm-hmm. And tell us why this suit is important and what you hope to achieve.
Well, this suit is an absolute last resort. Our association and the PTA and the California School Boards Association has worked for years trying to have the funding of schools match the expectations for our students. And the expectations have continued to rise for our students in California schools as our funding has continued to slide on a per pupil basis. And so what we're saying is that we believe that's unconstitutional. The Constitution of the state of California calls for a system of common schools where all kids will reach the standards that are set by the state. We believe that there is not a system for that. We believe that they haven't really thought through when you add something more that kids are supposed to do, you also need to add some time to their school year or school day so that they can help meet those expectations. So, as I said, this is not just about funding, which it is about finance, but it's also about expectations. And those two need to come into line for it actually to be a system of common schools. So no matter where you go to school in the state of California, there would be the resources for you to meet the expectations that are set for you.
So the constitutional violation is what?
Well, the constitutional violation is that there is no system to create common schools. Okay. Right now, for example, right here in Santa Clara County, we have school districts that have over $14,000 per pupil per year and schools that have only $4,500 per pupil per year. That's not a system. That just says that where you happen to go to school is going to determine whether or not you're really qualified to go to college or to go into a career. And that is not a system of school. The responsibility for schooling in the Constitution sets with the state. It sets with the legislature and the governor. And we believe that over the years, that not just this governor, not just this legislature, but for the last 30 to 40 years have reneged on their actions to create this system of common schooling.
Now, we do have standards, and you say we have expectations. Mm-hmm. So explain how that relates to this.
Okay. Well, we have some of the highest standards in the nation. Rated by the Fordham Foundation. California standards are right up there with the top. They're rated A. We also have some of the highest graduation requirements. We have requirements for kids to take, these days, more science, more mathematics, more English, more history than prior generations. And yet, schools receive less funding per pupil than prior generations. In 1965, for example, California was 5th in the nation in funding per pupil. We're now somewhere near last. Depending on which figures you look at, we're between 44th and 49th, so out of the 50 states. So it just seems to me that as our expectations went up and as our requirements to get into college went up, our funding went down. That is the exact opposite of a system.
Now, they're called adequacy suits. There have been many states have filed adequacy suits. So how might this be different? And there have been a range of adequacy suits. Some have taken 30 years to solve. So So why is this different from other states' adequacy suits?
Well, you have to remember that every state has a state constitution, and education is in the state constitution. There's nothing in the federal constitution about education. So each of the states' constitutions are somewhat different. They say different things. So the lawsuits that have gone across, I think 40 different states have had lawsuits around adequate funding. This is not really an adequacy lawsuit per se, but 40 of them have had these different suits. And depending on what's in their constitution, the suits take different tacks. Our Constitution very clearly talks about the state's responsibility for a system of free common schools. And so that's the part of the Constitution that we are bringing focus to. And we believe that any rational Californian will look at this and say, gee, you're right. There isn't really a system. We've raised expectations. We've made it tougher and tougher for kids to get through school. At the same time, we've taken all the resources away from them. No counselors, no administrators, very few teachers, large class sizes. And those things are just not going to get the expectations met that Californians have for our kids.
So how do you actually go about then determining how to price these expectations? How do you price a standard? How do you say a third grader should be reading at this level and therefore it requires X number of dollars?
Well, it's a good question. And there are researchers that have answered that question. In fact, the Getting Down to Facts studies that were done here by our Stanford University had 23 independent research teams answer that very question. Here's what the expectations are. What will it cost to get there? And their answers range from a little bit more to a whole lot more. Range as much as $40 billion more to reach some of those expectations. Right. And that's on a base of about a $50 billion school budget for the state of California. So some of that work has been done. It would have to be redone to some extent for today's dollars. But basically, we have a pretty good sense that those studies, as well as the governor's own Excellence in Education Commission, said that the amount that we're putting behind kids now is not sufficient to get kids through. That's why our dropout rates are so high. That's why our achievement gap is so high between poor kids and rich kids. And so it's pretty clear that our finance system is broken. And this is basically our opportunity, our last resort to try to fix it.
So are you looking for a judge to say, you know, instead of $7,000 per student, let's make it 10? How do you want this to be?
No, we don't think a judge really has the expertise to put a dollar amount on it. What we want a judge to say is, you're right, the system's broken. Now there should be a team of experts that goes back and looks at this system, the system that was created in the late 60s, early 70s around both the Serrano decision and the Prop 13 passage. They created a new system of funding schools that centralized everything to California. To take a look at that system and say, this team of experts, you need to come up with a recommendation that then the legislature and the governor looks at and either adopts or tweaks or changes. But basically, all we want the judge to say is, you're right, our system of schooling in California, the funding system of schooling in California is broken, right, and it needs to be fixed.
Well, the governor, as you know about this governor, as soon as he came in, there was another suit before him, and Governor Gray Davis fought it for several years. And this governor came in, Governor Schwarzenegger came in and settled it. Right. His reaction immediately to this suit was, I'm going to fight this.
Yeah, we're rather surprised at that because he did settle the Williams lawsuit that was brought against Gray Davis. And it was similar kinds of issues, that kids in areas of poverty didn't have the textbooks they needed, didn't have credentialed teachers, and didn't have safe and clean classrooms. Governor Schwarzenegger came in and said, I believe in education, I think we should invest in education, I'm going to settle this suit, not waste any more money defending the state's position because we haven't adequately taken care of our kids. That's, we think, what the answer to this suit ought to be. Mm-hmm. The governor ought to sit down with us and the plaintiffs, the 60 plaintiffs, the children that are in this suit and their families, and say, you know, you're right. Our system of funding is broken. We're not going to waste any money defending the existing system. We're going to get on with fixing it.
Well, you know, the Getting Down to Facts study and the Governor's Commission also said we need more money, but we need to spend it wisely. It's just not more money. Right. So how does this suit address that issue?
Well, we think it's a great opportunity. Once you fix the funding system and you said, here's what it's going to take to reach the expectation, it's a great opportunity to say, how should we spend it differently? So when, you know, money, about $17, $18 billion have been cut out of public education just in the last 2 years alone in California. And so if that money were to come back, plus some, you'd be able to say, here's the way it ought to be spent differently. We ought to rethink the kind of delivery of models because our focus is on reaching the expectations of our standards, the expectations of the coursework we expect, and the expectations of our universities. And so it's a great opportunity if you have the resources to retool the system.
So you're hoping that the next governor comes in and deals with you and settles this case and not extends this case out?
Frankly, I guess the optimist in me would say, I hope this governor does it. He still has until January to complete his term. I would hope that Governor Schwarzenegger would end his term in office the same way he started it, by solving a lawsuit that was absolutely accurate and restore public education in the state of California to the golden level that it once was, and leave with a legacy of excellence.
Well, Chuck Weis, enjoyed speaking with you. I hope we can come back and it won't be 30 years till we talk about the resolution. Thank you for watching.